Hello, first graders. This is Miss Puckett again, and today I'm going to be sharing with you the next read aloud in our Frontier Explorers domain, Sacagawea. Now let's go ahead and start with some of the vocabulary that we're going to be using. The first word is permanent. Permanent means lasting a long time and not changing in place or condition. The next word is plunged. This means fell or dropped quickly. Third, we have protection. This is something that keeps you safe. Then we have skilled. This means trained to do something or being good at something. And last, the word translate. This means to change words from one language into another language. Now today you are going to hear about where Lewis and Clark spent the winter of their expedition and the people that they met while they were there. Your job is to listen, to learn where they were, and to figure out who they decided to hire as a guide and a translator for the rest of their expedition. As autumn approached, Lewis and Clark were in a hurry. They knew the Rocky Mountains lay ahead, and they hoped to spend the winter there among the Mandan and the Hidatsa. However, it was already so cold that the river was freezing into ice. And when the river froze, it was impossible to travel up the river in their boats. Where the Knife River flows into the Missouri, Lewis and Clark found 5 villages of Hidatsa and Mandan Native Americans. Like other Native Americans living along the plains, these people hunted bison, also known as buffalo, from horseback. They also lived in permanent earth lodges and farmed the land around their homes. Now, this means that they had shelters and that they did not move, unlike nomads who moved their shelters with them. 4 or 5 families shared each lodge, and even the horses spent bad weather days inside in a roped-off space just inside the entrance. The Mandans especially welcomed the travelers from the east because they were used to visitors. Other Native American tribes and trappers came to the Mandan area to share news and to buy and sell furs from beavers, bear, elk, and bison. Across the river, from one of the Mandan villages, the explorers built a wooden house and surrounded it with log walls 18 feet high for protection. The men of the Corps of Discovery called their winter home Fort Mandan, named after the Mandan Native Americans. They dragged the pirogues onto the riverbank, but before they could move the keelboat, the river froze around it. It took 3 weeks to chop the keelboat out of the ice. They had other worries too. Lewis and Clark spoke one day, and Lewis told Clark, "We are eating so much food that we will run out before the winter is over, and this is terrible weather, and it's getting harder to hunt." Thankfully, the Mandans appeared one day to tell them, "We have found a herd of bison nearby. Come hunting with us. We have brought horses for you to ride." The result was more food and warm blankets made of their hides. As the winter nights grew long and the temperatures plunged to 30, even 40 degrees below zero, the explorers also traded with the Mandan for food. In return for the food the Mandan gave them, Lewis and Clark acted as doctors for members of the tribes who were sick or injured, and several of the explorers who were skilled as blacksmiths made iron tools, axes, and arrowheads for the Mandans. The party spent many cold nights asking the Hidatsas and the Mandans about the country that lay ahead of them. Lewis and Clark kept all of the information that they heard and that they learned in a journal. Now, why do you think that Lewis and Clark kept that information in a journal? They probably used this as notes so that they would not forget and they could go back and read it again as they continued on in their expedition. Then one day a French-Canadian trader appeared at the gates of Fort Mandan. He announced, "I am Toussaint Charbonneau. I heard about you from the Hidatsas. I am an excellent cook, and I speak English, French, and several Native American languages. I could cook for you and translate what is said in other languages into English." Now, Lewis and Clark couldn't speak any of the Native American languages, so they needed people who could talk to them and to the Native Americans that they would also meet. Sacagawea was a member of the Shoshone tribe who lived farther along the Missouri River. The Shoshone were the next tribe that Lewis and Clark expected to meet. Lewis and Clark discussed Charbonneau's offer. Sacagawea would be helpful when we reach the lands of the Shoshone. She could show the Shoshone that we come as friends, and she knows a lot about the countryside there. As for Charbonneau, if he is the cook he claims to be, he will be a welcome addition to our party. Lewis told Charbonneau, "We want you and your wife to join us, and of course, we will pay you for your work." This turned out to be one of the best decisions that the co-captains ever made. And while they had agreed to hire 2 new members for the expedition, they soon had 3. One cold night, Sacagawea gave birth to a little boy. Charbonneau, the new father, looked proudly at his newborn son and said, "We shall call you Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau." William Clark laughed. "That's an awfully big name for such a little fellow. I'll call him Pompey." Pompey proved to be a good little traveler, too. Lewis and Clark organized their notes and drawings and labeled samples of plants and animals that they had gathered. When spring came, Clark announced, "We have decided to split the party into 2 groups. We will send some of you back to the east to take President Jefferson the things we've collected and written. The rest of us will continue west." Remember, there were no telephones and no email yet. And there was no way to send mail in the Louisiana Territory. Lewis and Clark sent some of the Corps of the Discovery to tell Jefferson of their progress and what they had found so far. On April 7th, 1805, some of the party returned back east as planned. They carried with them 4 boxes and a trunk filled with plant and rock samples, as well as the captain's journals and drawings. They also took with them some living animals, such as a magpie, which is a type of bird, and a prairie dog. Lewis told Clark, "I wish I could see President Jefferson's face when that magpie starts chattering away. The president will be mighty pleased, and he will be delighted with all of the information in our journals and drawings." Clark replied, "He will be even happier when you and I report to him in person that we have reached the Pacific." Then the 2 men started westward once more with the remaining men, 1 woman, Sacagawea, and a baby. So let's take a moment to review our read aloud. Do you remember who Lewis and Clark spent the winter with? Lewis and Clark spent the winter with Native Americans, specifically the Mandan and the Hidatsa tribes. How did the Mandan tribe get food, and where did they live? The Mandan tribe hunted buffalo and they farmed, and they lived in permanent homes that they did not pack up and take with them. Who was Sacagawea? Sacagawea was the Native American woman that Lewis and Clark hired to help them on their expedition. Now, how did Lewis and Clark think that Sacagawea could be helpful? They believed that she could be a guide because she knew the land, and they also believed that she could be a translator because she spoke many of those Native American languages. Why did Lewis and Clark decide to split the expedition into two groups? They split the group into two smaller groups so that one group could travel back to President Jefferson and update him on their findings, while the other group continued on west. What did Lewis and Clark have the men take back to President Jefferson? They had the men take plants, rocks, animals, their journals, and drawings back to President Jefferson. Why did they keep information in their journals? They kept that information as notes for themselves, and they also used it as a report to send back to Thomas Jefferson. So which two of President Jefferson's 3 tasks did Lewis and Clark accomplish in the read aloud today? The first that they accomplished was making friends with Native Americans, and they also collected samples of different plants and animals. Do you know which task they have not completed yet? They have not found an all-water route to the Pacific Ocean. Now let's take a moment again to do a think, pair, share. So today we don't have a question for our read aloud. Today you are going to pretend that you are the teacher, and you are going to find a buddy in your home and you're going to ask them questions. Now, if they have listened to the read aloud with you, you can check their understanding. If they have not, then you have the opportunity to teach them about what you have just learned. So thank you for joining us today, and we look back to sharing the next read aloud with you.